he pointed out that even before Jesus Christ, it was mentioned that Elijah, or Elia is also mentioned, he would descend bodily from the heaven. Every Jew knew that by heart. Every Jew remembered that this would be the sign appearing before Jesus Christ would come. So, Elijah will descend bodily from heaven, and then he will announce to the world that the time of Jesus Christ is near at hand, so open up the locks of your hearts, be ready to accept. Now what happened? Jesus did appear, but without that literal Elijah descending from heaven. So people used to mock and taunt the followers of Jesus Christ, asking them, okay, he could be right, of course, but please produce Elijah from the heaven first. Or do you deny scriptures? Do you say the scriptures were false? Of course they could not deny scriptures. Now this question was raised in the presence of Jesus Christ, and he answered this question. I don't know the exact words, but I'll tell you the effect. He said, John the Baptist is the same Elijah who was to descend from heaven. Accept it or not. But he has come. Now Hazrat Mirza Sahib pointed out, both to the Christians and the Muslims, that would you agree with Jesus' verdict or not? People are expected to come bodily from heaven as clearly as Elijah was. And yet somebody in their name, in their character comes, and those who follow the literal meaning overmuch, they are disappointed. They don't recognize such a person. They continue to reject. So he said, it's up to you. Having explained this situation, he said, I am the same Jesus descended from heaven exactly as Elijah descended from heaven before Jesus Christ. And for that, with that explanation, you don't have to expect two separate persons appearing. One the old Jesus and one Imam Mahdi. He said in the case of Islam, the reform which was promised was to be one person with two titles. One title was Al-Imam al-Mahdi, the guided leader appointed by God in Islam. The other was the promised Messiah, the Christ, who was promised both to the people of Christianity and the people of Islam. So this was his explanation of how things would come to pass. Now he came and he was rejected by a large number of Muslims, of course, as you know very well. But what happened? How did God treat him and his followers? This is the issue which is still alive, which requires your particular attention. Because if I quote just history to you, you may be in doubt about the authenticity of our records of history. But what you see before your eyes and what you know about Christianity as it happened, you can compare it with the history of Ahmadiyyat very easily and the present situation of Ahmadiyya. You know, Christianity was opposed more vehemently, if anything, than Ahmadiyyat was opposed by the people of the time of Hazrat Masih Maud Islam. More vehemently also in the sense that the atrocities committed against the early Christians were far more grievous and beastly than the atrocities committed against Ahmadis. Of course, there are so many atrocities committed against Ahmadis, but in comparison, they are paled. You know, they were put to death by being presented to the wild beast in arenas, and they were burnt alive in their homes in large numbers. The same attempts were made against Ahmadis, but God saved them from being burnt alive. That is a different story. But altogether, to sum up this long history of persecution and God's treatment, we can say one thing for certain. During all the phases of revived persecution and renewed persecution against Christianity, there did not dawn a single day in the history of Christianity when Christianity was pulverized and reduced and rendered powerless. In the face of all this atrocity, it continued to march forward, continued to gain greater following, and emerge larger rather than smaller through the middle of persecution. Now this is a living history. There is something for which you don't have to go to the books. This is exactly as you see history emerging to the present times. We do not trust books for this. We know Christianity has almost conquered the whole world. So if this claim was not right, how could there be Christianity today found in such power and grandeur? So that is what I mean, the living history. And similarly apply the same principle to the history of Ahmadiyyat, and the living history of Ahmadiyyat would repeat exactly the same thing. Every attempt to destroy Ahmadiyyat kicked back on the enemies, and every attempt was frustrated by God and resulted in exactly the opposite results, in exactly the opposite consequences of that persecution. I was turned out of, practically, literally, by the government of Pakistan during Zia's time, 10 years ago. And the spread of Ahmadiyyat has increased by last year, I'm talking about last year, this year it will be more, by a factor of 50 times during those 9 years passed during the last, till the last annual gathering of Ahmadiyya community here in UK. So 9 years of exile brought us such great success that instead of having 5,000 Ahmadis converted per year, we got 200,000 Ahmadis converted in 1 year and more. And this year I hope inshallah the pace will increase to about 100 times. So this is what Allah does to us. That is what the enemies do to us. And if you compare us with the early history of Christianity, you will find that the comparison is, if at all, to our advantage. In the first 100 years of Christianity, it had spread to around a score of countries, not more. But in the first 100 years of Ahmadiyya history, we have spread to 140 countries of the world. We have emerged as a much more formidable and reckonable power than Christianity was at the end of its first century. So this is a short answer to your question.
Okay.
I hope it would satisfy your query.
Likely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just on what you are saying, say about the people changing over to Ahmadi. Is it only from the Islamic side or both Islamic and
From every
Christian?
side, of course. From pagans, from Christians,